2020. Can we have roll call, please?
Chair Frank,
Here.
Vice Chair Sanchez, Commissioner Chavez,
Here.
Commissioner Dozier,
Here.
Commissioner Meyer.
Here.
We have a quorum.
Thank you. Please indulge me while I go through some of the process that we're going to follow tonight. That is, everyone should be placed on mute unless you're speaking. Is there an ice cream truck going by?
Yeah, I tried to
Okay.
unmute it. I gotta just figure out this medium here.
Okay.
So,
Anyway, I'm asked to advise everyone to please place themselves on mute unless they're speaking. There's a sound delay experience when we do these meetings remotely, so you might want to pause before starting to speak. Please announce who you are before speaking, because maybe the people can't recognize who is speaking. I don't know why that would be, but and okay, this says to use the chat box to identify that you would like to speak. I don't know what a chat box is, so I don't know where that is.
Chair Frank.
Yes. Where is it?
The chat box is in the upper right-hand corner. It looks like a little message icon.
I see it. Okay.
You click that and it will go to all of us. And my understanding is that our clerk, Ms. Travis, is supposed to be monitoring that and advising you of who's next to speak up.
Okay, I see. Thank you. All right. And that's really it. Mr. Kolowitz?
Thank you. Thank you, Chair Frank, and members of the Planning Commission and members of the public that are joining us for this adventure digitally. One quick announcement as we go into roll call with everyone. There is one fewer Planning Commission member who is joining us tonight. Planning Commissioner Chua has resigned from the Planning Commission. His resignation was effective immediately, so he is not here tonight with us. With that, the rest of the Planning Commission members are still with us, and if we can have Ms. Travis go ahead and do roll call, that would be great.
We did roll call.
Oh.
We already did roll call.
My apologies for that.
Okay, thank you very much. Let's have Commissioner Chavez lead us in the pledge since he is all decked out. Commissioner Chavez.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Just had to unmute myself. So indulge me, place your right hand over your heart. Ready, begin. I pledge allegiance to the flag
of the United States of America.
of the United States of America and to the republic
To the republic for which it stands,
one nation, under God,
indivisible, with
indivisible, liberty and justice for all.
for all. Are we all done? Good. Thank you very much.
Yes.
We'll move to public comment. These are comments on items that are not on our agenda this evening. I understand we have received one written public comment, but perhaps the clerk could advise if there's anyone calling in.
We received no request for a phone in.
Thank you. Mr. Kolowitz.
Thank you, Chair Frank. This one email correspondence, it's fairly short, so I'm just going to read it in its entirety. This is from Irene Rauschenberger. It is addressed to the full Planning Commission, and it says, planning meeting, this is a comment submitted regarding page number 4 of the Coastal Land Use Plan, February 1982, item number 5. The LCP land use map for McGrath Mandalay Beach map number 1 is amended to designate the North Shore at Mandalay Bay project site for this resource protection area, recreation area, and plan unit development residential. And then she says, this quote is alarmingly and blatantly wrong. And then she provides an additional comment. This residential location is at the northeast corner of Harbor Boulevard and 5th Street. This is the last remaining sensitive sand dune area that should be protected from residential development. This location is a destination for the historic 5th Street artery that leads to the Oxnard Shores Beach that is already in inequitable development. Please save the last remaining sand dunes that lie north of 5th Street for habitat and community. Ironically, the CLUP notes, nothing in this zone section shall restrict public or private access to recreational opportunities provided within the coastal zone of the city of Oxnard. And there's a citation to section 37-2.13.1 of the coastal zoning ordinance. This is not true should the dunes fate be residential development. Respectfully, Irene Rauschenberger, native resident.
Thank you very much. Not hearing of any other public comment, we'll move to our consent agenda. Is Commissioner Sanchez with us yet? Anyone? Has Commissioner Sanchez joined? Well, if he's not there, we cannot approve. Let's go to item D1, approval of the minutes for February 20. There would only be two of us.
Chair Frank,
yeah.
Frank, this is Scott Kolbitz. It appears that Commissioner Sanchez is likely with us. His phone appears to be muted currently. So Commissioner Sanchez, if you dial *6, that should unmute your phone.
Well, in the meantime, let's pass on D1 and go to D2, approval of the minutes for March 19. Everyone have an opportunity to review those?
Yes.
Okay, do I have a motion to approve?
Move to approve.
Okay, we have a motion to approve the minutes of March 19. We need a roll call.
And I'll second if needed.
Yeah, Chavez moves and Meyer seconds approval of the minutes. We need a roll call.
Commissioner Chavez,
Aye.
Commissioner Meyer,
Yes.
Commissioner Dozier,
Yes.
Chair Frank.
Yes,
Motion passes.
thank you very much. When Sanchez comes into the scene here, let me know so we can go back to D1.
Hello?
Excuse me? Okay,
Chair Frank,
okay, so let,
it
please.
well, it appears that Commissioner Sanchez or Vice Chair Sanchez was with us for about 15 seconds. His phone popped up. We'll hopefully have him rejoin us again in just a moment.
Okay. In the meantime, may I inquire of those commissioners present if there's been any ex parte interaction on our next public hearing item? Anybody?
No, for Commissioner Dozier.
Thank you. Mr. Chavez? Any ex parte, Commissioner Chavez?
I'm sorry, Madam Chair. The icon went away for the mute. No, ma'am. No ex parte.
Thank you.
Hello.
Oh, Commissioner Sanchez.
Yes, hello. I
Hi.
was on there before, but I noticed that no one could hear me, so I got out and came back in.
Oh, wonderful. So we'd like to go to item D1 on the agenda. That's approval of the February 20 minutes.
Yes.
Okay, so I would move to approve. And on this, only Frank, Sanchez, and Meyer can vote. So I'll move to approve the minutes of February 20.
Second?
We have a motion and a second. Can we have a roll call, please?
Chair Frank,
Yes.
Vice Chair Sanchez,
Yes.
Commissioner Meyer.
Yes.
Motion passes.
And the other commissioners will be abstaining, correct?
Yes. Madam Chair,
Yes.
Commissioner Dozier abstains.
Commissioner Chavez abstain.
Thank you. All right. Now we'll go into our public hearing, item F1. This is 2030 General Plan and Local Coastal Plan Conformity Determination for the City of Oxnard Capital Improvement Program for fiscal years 2020 through 2025. I understand we're going to have a short introduction by our city manager and our Director of Public Works. Do I have that right?
Hello, Chair and Commissioners. This is Rosemary Gaglione. I'm the Public
Can't
Works.
hear you. There we go.
Chair and Commissioners, this is Rosemary Gaglione. I'm the Public Works Director. We're very excited about the update on the 5-year CIP. Your capital improvement program is critical to a city. It's a 5-year roadmap. It lays out everything that the city plans to do over the next 5 years, and it also shows the city's priorities. And it keeps staff working on the correct priorities, keeps everybody going in the right direction, everybody rowing together. And as we're always looking for grant opportunities, when a grant opportunity comes up, it's a CIP that they're going to turn to look and see if any of the projects that the council has directed us to work on match up with that particular grant. This is also a great opportunity. This CIP is a product of collaboration with Public Works, Finance, and IT, and of course, here at the end, our partners in many other things, the Planning Department. One thing that you'll notice is in the introduction to the CIP, when we talk about how a lot of projects had to be moved around and the cost estimates were increased for paving jobs because there's so much in other road jobs, because there was so much gas tax money out there that the contractors were all very busy and so costs are very high. And that was the assumption going into this. Of course, now with COVID, we don't know. We don't know what funding is going to be there, and so it may be that some of the schedule for some of these projects may change. I know that's not the concern of this commission, but just so that anybody is listening who might take a look at this document and say, you didn't take COVID into account. No, we didn't, because we had to stop somewhere so that we could go ahead and bring this document to you and then onto the council. So with that, I'm going to turn this over to Tatiana Arnaud, our city engineer, who was in charge of this update.
Thank you.
Thank you, Rosemary. So good evening, Chair and Commissioners. My name is Tatiana Arnaud, and I'm the city engineer. I have been given the honor of presenting the 2030 General Plan and Local Coastal Plan Conformity Determination for the City of Oxnard Capital Improvement Program for fiscal years 2020 through 2025. So today you'll be receiving an overview of the Capital Improvement Program, or what I'll be referring to as the CIP. Then I'm going to go into basically the 2030 General Plan and Local Coastal Plan Conformity Determinations for this CIP. And I will conclude the presentation with some highlights of the accomplishments from this past fiscal year. So it's my understanding that a few planning commissioners are new, and so they were not here for last year's CIP process. So we thought it'd be a good idea to kind of give you guys an overview of what the CIP is, as well as what the process entails. So in simple terms, the CIP is the city's plan to build or restore our facilities. This does not include maintenance work, and some examples may include the construction and major alterations of buildings, IT hardware, pipeline replacement, playground structure replacement, street rehabilitation, traffic signal hardware installation, and wastewater treatment plant electrical work. So in order for a project to qualify for the CIP, there are 2 criteria it must meet. First, it must consist of the construction, erection, alteration, renovation, improvement, demolition, or repair work involving any city-owned facility. And it also needs to be a project that's at least $100,000. I'd like to point out that studies and rolling equipment purchases do not qualify under the CIP. So here's a quick overview of the CIP process in general. So first and foremost, the departments identify the necessary capital improvements. This is usually done through master planning or studies that are conducted at each of the facilities. Staff then turns this over to planning for them to determine conformity with the general plan. Then engineering staff verifies the cost estimates and works with finance to determine the priority for the funding. That then leads us to present the CIP in front of you so that we can determine the conformity with the general plan as required by law. And then that will be followed by a presentation at the Public Works and Transportation Committee. And finally, we will seek approval at City Council. So your role in this process is based off of Government Code Section 65401, where the Planning Commission is required to review this list of proposed capital improvement projects and verify their conformance with the city's 2030 general plan and the relevant coastal land use plan policies. There's also Government Code Section 65402, which requires that real property acquisition or disposition, street vacation or abandonment, public building or structure construction be consistent with the general plan and the local coastal land use plan as to location, purpose, and extent. So the Planning Commission review and verification is documented through the resolution in this process. And that's, again, just to show that the CIP is in conformity with the general plan and the local coastal plan. I'd like to point out that the Planning Commission does not set the priorities for these projects. That responsibility lies with the City Council alone. So that is not the purpose of what we're trying to do here today. And with that overview, I'd like to present to you the actual list of new projects for the fiscal year 2020 through 2025 CIP. So here on the screen, you see a few images of the new projects. On the top left is the Campus Park Activation Project, which is actually really exciting. We recently received...
Excuse me.
Sorry.
Excuse me.
Yes.
Are we actually supposed to be able to see the screen?
Yes.
Why don't I see it? Am I supposed to click something on? You're muted.
Chair Frank, this is Commissioner Dozier.
Hi.
What I did was go to the YouTube channel in a separate browser window so I could follow the presentation.
Oh, okay. No one told me to do that. All right. Oh, well. Thank you. Go ahead.
Actually, the commissioner already.
They're
I was going to say.
they're going to share the screen so that you can see it.
Oh. There. Beautiful.
Fantastic. Sorry about that.
Thank you.
Okay. Are you guys able to see the screen?
Yes.
Fantastic. So actually, before I even jump into these images, I'd like to preface this new list with the fact that there are no new Measure O or general fund projects for this next CIP. There are several reasons for that, and primarily it's just funding deficiencies across the board. I just wanted to point that out briefly. But back to the Campus Park activation, we did receive an $8.5 million grant for this project, which is really exciting. I know that this has been a long time coming. I've shown these other two pictures here just to show you our aging infrastructure as well as the deferred maintenance that we're dealing with presently. So under the community development plan category, goal number 3, which is described as a city of stable, safe, attractive, and revitalized neighborhoods with adequate parks, schools, infrastructure, and community identity and pride, there are 4 projects total. Typically speaking, the projects that fall under this category are related to parks and hardscapes. Here you see an image of a basketball court that is in desperate need of resurfacing. And under the infrastructure and community services plan category number 1, or goal number 1, which is described as the provision of adequate facilities and services that maintain service levels with adequate funding, there are a whopping 32 new projects for that category. These mainly consist of the street resurfacing and utility improvements, as well as improvements to our facilities. Here you see an image of the Oxnard Transit Center, where we will be resurfacing and restriping all the parking areas, as well as installing new lighting and security cameras throughout. In this image, you'll see Doris Avenue, where there's some pretty serious longitudinal cracking happening here, along with a couple of other things, so that's something that needs to be addressed. Edison Drive, this is a pretty typical example of alligator cracking on that road. And again, here in the Rice Avenue commercial area, we see more alligator cracking presenting itself. In the East Village neighborhood, they're dealing with a lot of tree roots that are undermining the street, so those need to be dealt with. And here you see the old SCADA system at the wastewater plant. It's pretty outdated, and it's definitely in need of upgrades just to keep the facility running smoothly. Under the Infrastructure and Community Services Plan category, goal number 8, which is described as safe bicycle and pedestrian circulation throughout the city, we have only one project, which is the 4th Street Mobility Improvements. This project consists of basically improving the corridor along 4th Street from the Oxnard Transit Center all the way to C Street. And what we're trying to do is widen the sidewalks and add bike lanes to make it a more walkable and bike-friendly area. Under the Infrastructure and Community Services Plan category, goal number 11, which is described as water supply, quality, distribution, and storage, excuse me, adequate for existing and future development. This is what we call a total organic carbon analyzer. So basically it analyzes the carbon levels in water, and this is needed to make sure that we have adequate water for our processes at the Advanced Water Purification Facility. So under goal number 12 of the same plan category, which is described as adequate capacity at the city wastewater treatment plant to accommodate existing and future development, we have 5 projects total. The one that's pictured here is lift station number 24. This one is actually located off of Vineyard Avenue near Oxnard Boulevard. We will be doing some upgrades to that facility as it's failing. Under plan category, safety and hazards, goal number 4, which is described as the emergency preparedness through the provision of adequate fire and police protection, infrastructure, emergency supply stockpiling, public education, EOC planning and procedures, and outreach programs. We have one project, and that's the renovation of the Emergency Operations Center. So the intent of this project is essentially to upgrade the obsolete and inoperable audio-video equipment, computer systems, and things of the like. So that concluded the list of the new CIP projects for this committee's consideration. Now I'd like to turn your attention to what staff has accomplished in this current fiscal year so you have an idea of how tax dollars have been spent. So we are concluding this year with 32 projects in the design phase, another 14 in the queue for bidding, and most importantly, a total of 19 projects constructed with a value of $27.8 million total. Now, some of these are in construction as we speak, however, the funding is committed with the construction contracts. I'd also like to point out that we actually started this fiscal year with 1.5 project managers. I have a transportation planner acting as a project manager to help keep these projects moving, but luckily in September we gained another 2 project managers, and finally in January we were able to obtain the 4th, bringing us to a total of 4.5 project managers and 65 projects touched in this year. So here are some examples of those projects that we completed. Most notoriously is probably Fire Station number 6. This one actually made it onto last year's and this year's CIP cover. What it consisted of was the replacement of the roof and the wood siding, as well as repairs to the interior that were water damaged. We also installed the flashing pedestrian beacons throughout the city. The one pictured here is off of 2nd Street by B Street, so here near the City Council chambers. We worked with Gold Coast for the Route 23 bus stop installation project. So we installed multiple bus stops along Ventura Road, which is the new Route 23. I believe it is not in operation yet, but it will be soon. This is another infamous one. So we actually resurfaced the entire length of Channel Islands Boulevard. On the picture on the left, you see what it looked like originally, and on the right, that's what you would see today. And finally, we have the Bryce Canyon North and South and Fremont North neighborhood cast iron pipe replacement. So we took the old aging cast iron pipes out, and we're putting in new PVC pipe that's supposed to have a service life of at least 50 years. So this is the list of the 19 projects that I mentioned that were either completed or in construction. I won't go through every single one, but I'll highlight generally by category what we were able to accomplish. So under category for buildings, we mostly completed the roof replacement repairs, the roof repairs to several facilities. That included the Fire Station 5, Fire Station 6, and the PAL Gymnasium. For seawalls, the pilaster jacket repairs, those are actually under construction right now, and what we're doing is we are putting concrete jackets on the existing concrete pilasters to extend the life of the pilasters. Under transportation and drainage, the majority of the projects were either street resurfacing or pedestrian enhancing projects. Here are some examples. So what's in construction right now is actually that thin maintenance overlay. So we are paving 78 lane miles throughout the city. That equates to about 8% of our total city lane miles. And under utilities, probably the most notable project is the emergency repairs project at the Oxnard Wastewater Treatment Plant. Basically, that consisted of replacing all the belt filter presses. There was 4 of them. Replace the very old and not operational HVAC system over the lab, and we are also rehabbing the clarifiers. In addition to that, we constructed a new chemically enhanced primary treatment system, which has had tremendous effect on the processes at the wastewater plant. So finally, the staff recommendation is that the Planning Commission adopt the resolution finding that the proposed capital improvement program projects for fiscal year 2020 through 2025 are in conformance with the City of Oxnard 2030 General Plan and the relevant coastal land use plan policies pursuant to Section 65-401 of the Government Code. In addition to that, the environmental determinations are such that, as required by the California Environmental Quality Act, or otherwise known as CEQA, environmental review will be conducted prior to the construction of the individual projects identified within the staff report. Any required environmental documents will be prepared pursuant to CEQA as part of the project permit processing or at any other point in time as required by CEQA. This CIP general plan and coastal land use plan conformity determination report is not, in quotes, a project under CEQA. That does conclude my presentation, and I am happy to take any questions.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Commissioners, any questions of staff?
No questions from Commissioner Dozier.
Thank you.
Chair Frank, just one
Commissioner
question.
Meyer.
Yes, thank you. Just one question for my clarification. So in the attachment, I think the first document that we got, there was a couple hundred pages of projects, some which were funded, some which were not going to be funded, priorities 1 through 3. So that was more of a reference piece, but not the actual item that we're discussing tonight. Is that right?
Hello, this is Rosemary Gaglione. No, that all of the items within the CIP, we need you to determine that they are in conformance with the general plan. Those projects just say the funding is not yet identified. If we come across some funding, if we get a grant, if things improve with the general fund's finances, we can go ahead and move those projects forward. If we don't have these projects listed, even though we don't have funding identified, and a great grant opportunity comes along, we have to come to you, we have to schedule all of these things before we can even go ahead and apply and bring it to council to authorize us applying for the grant. So this is why I say this is our 5-year roadmap, sets us up, lets everybody know what we're looking at doing, and it sort of clears the decks and makes way so that we're able to move forward quickly when the opportunities arise.
Understood. Thank you. As far as all of because there was, I think, well over 100 different projects that were, but maybe that was because that was the 2019 to 24 CIP. Is that why I'm seeing so much more that we reviewed versus what we're looking at just today?
Commissioner Meyer, this is Scott Kolwitz. I think I could help. So there's 2 different attachments on this to the staff report. One, attachment A, was focused in on new projects that have been added to the CIP compared to what the Planning Commission looked at last year. Attachment B is the full capital improvement program, which includes projects that had been reviewed last year, not the project, but the projects that were completed were taken out. And then the projects that are listed in attachment A, the new ones are also in attachment B. So attachment A was really focusing planning commissioners on the new items, but attachment B is the whole of the CIP. Because the Planning Commission looked at the 2019-2024 CIP last year and found it to be consistent with the general plan and the coastal land use plan, we did not focus on those because those determinations have already been made that those projects were in fact consistent. Does that help?
Yes. That's perfect. Thank you, Scott.
Thank you.
Any other questions of staff?
Chair Frank, Commissioner Chavez. Staff, thank you for the presentation. I just had a couple of comments. I know on slide 25, it was brought up that there were a couple of neighborhoods undergoing replacement of the old cast iron pipes to the new 50-year lifespan one. Is there any plans in the future, or maybe I missed it, to resurface those areas, in particularly Fremont North along H Street, which has been really bad, poor condition for a number of years? Is there any plans on that, or maybe I missed that?
Yes, Commissioner Chavez, we are planning on, our plan is to resurface that next fiscal year. So anytime we replace the cast iron pipe, we're going to go ahead and follow that right behind with resurfacing of those same streets.
Now, is there any way possible, Rice Avenue has always been a big issue, but is there any way possible to work with the port, possibly have them kick in some funding, seeing how their semi trucks that are delivering to and from the port maybe step in and provide some funding to resurface that street?
This is Rosemary Gaglione. We have not discussed that with the port.
Okay. Just the last comment in regards to the Gold Coast bus stops. One of them is literally down the street from my home, so I've seen that, and I know it's not operational now, but was it properly determined as far as ADA goes? Because I know it was already a small space, and I think about wheelchair passengers exiting from there in a limited space.
Yes, this is Tatiana Arnaud. That was absolutely taken into consideration. So all of those bus stops should meet minimum ADA requirements.
Okay, I appreciate that. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you. Anyone else? Okay, thank you very much.
Sorry, Chair,
I'm sorry.
I do have one other question to ask.
Commissioner Meyer.
Yes, Ms. Arnaud, as we're talking about specific locations, I hadn't been able to get an answer as to what's the status with Esplanade Drive. It's quite notable to me. Esplanade, when one is turning onto Esplanade from Vineyard, heading southbound on Vineyard, turning right onto Esplanade Drive, it is tremendously damaged street. And I was, and it's pretty bad throughout, but it's especially bad in that area. And I was wondering, is that somehow the responsibility of someone else other than the city, or is it just at a different point on the priority list? If you could answer that.
Yes, Commissioner Mayer. So we are actually having the pre-construction meeting next week for the TMO Phase 2 resurfacing project, which includes the entirety of Esplanade Drive, as well as Vineyard from the freeway to Oxnard Boulevard.
Wonderful. Thank you very much.
Okay, do we have any public comment on this item? Madam Clerk?
No, Chair Frank, we do not.
Okay, thank you. With that, I'll close public comment. And what's the pleasure of the commission? Someone want to make a motion?
I was move the recommended action.
I'll second. We have a motion by Chavez, second by Frank. Roll call, please.
Commissioner Chavez,
Aye.
Chair Frank,
Yes.
Commissioner Dozier,
Aye.
Commissioner Meyer,
Yes.
Vice Chair Sanchez,
Yes.
motion passes.
Thank you very much. We'll move to item G on our agenda, study session / reports. I don't think we have any of those.
Chair Frank, that is accurate. No study sessions or reports.
Thank you very much. We'll move to, here we go. Mr. Chavez, you ready? Okay, we're coming up on H1, Planning Commission business. Two of our planning commissioners went to Planning Commissioner Academy in March, and they're going to share with us some of the things that they learned. And so we're going to have Commissioner Chavez go first, and he'll introduce his program. And when he's concluded, we'll have Commissioner Meyer with his presentation. So I'm looking forward to this. Commissioner Chavez, it's all yours.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Madam Clerk, are you bringing it up on your screen?
Commissioner Chavez, yes, we are in the process of bringing it up. Give us just 1 second as we navigate the technical system over here.
Thank you. Okay, thank you, Madam Chair, Vice Chair, and fellow commissioners and public and staff. Dan Chavez Jr., Planning Commissioner. Today's presentation is about conducting a public meeting and hearing. We're going to be focusing pretty much on 2 items. If I can get the next slide, please. So the 2 major legal considerations is the Brown Act of 1953 and as well as due process. Next slide, please. So what is the Brown Act? Ultimately, it guarantees the public's right to attend and participate in the meeting of local legislative bodies. Little history about it, that it was authored by Assemblymember Ralph Brown who then, with the majority vote of the California Assembly, passed it in 1953. Next slide, please. That's a little hard to see, but there are two categories of who should be following the Brown Act. You have a legislative body, and then you have a non-legislative body. Legislative bodies are governing bodies such as city councils, or board of supervisors, and so forth. Then you have the appointed bodies, which we fall under as being commissioners, so citizen advisory groups. And then a standing committee, which has a majority of the members that does not have an end date. So we could have a subcommittee in our commission, and because it doesn't have an end date, it still would have to follow the Brown Act. A non-legislative body, it's listed based off of the information I received from the training in Sacramento back in March. It's an ad hoc committee that's comprised of less than a quorum, and then has a date where it's supposed to end completely. Next slide, please. So what is a meeting? The meeting is a quorum of the body where you have the opportunity to discuss, you hear, you deliberate on items of business within the jurisdiction of the legislative body. Next slide, please. Serial meetings. This one's a little interesting. It's a quorum of the body discussing, hearing, and deliberating outside of a public and notice meeting. And we're going to get into what those serial meetings are. Next slide, please. So there are ultimately about 4 different types of serial meetings that could occur. Number one being a hub and spoke. A hub and spoke is staff members communicating with commissioners or council members, so the legislative body. It would start off with the staff member being the hub, speaking to Commissioner A, then going and speaking to Commissioner B and disclosing what Commissioner A said, and so forth until all the commissioners have already had an understanding of where all the commissioners stand on a particular item or issue before them. Daisy chain being the second item of a serial meeting, where Commissioner A will speak to Commissioner B to Commissioner C, and then so forth until a majority of the legislative body has already heard the opinions and already discussed in any particular item. Emails was emphasized big time during our trainings in Sacramento, that it is recommended, and they emphasize this a lot, anytime when we receive emails from staff, do not, and I repeat, do not hit reply all. They recommended that you hit reply, and if you need additional members that need to be aware of whatever comments you need to be known, that it only goes to that staff member or individual, and then you just automatically, manually input the CC for those that need to be involved in that email. And then the last one is text and social media. So text messages similar to the emails. You know, you can get into a chain text message or group message, and when a quorum gets involved, then that counts as a serial meeting. Social media being a big one, where you can give your opinion on a particular item that's supposed to be coming before you, but then there may be other commissioners that have already commented on that. Many of us have Facebook or some type of social media, and when you click all comments, you get to view all of them. So it's best just to not give your opinion on any social media pages, just to avoid the appearance of a serial meeting. Next slide, please. Teleconferencing, similar to what we're doing right now. Of course, during this time, it is a little bit different. The rules did get relaxed. My understanding, and staff, you can correct me, when the COVID striked, the rules got a little relaxed as far as having the agenda list the location that a commissioner or a member of the legislative body will be at, and that the location had to be accessible to the public, and that a quorum of the body had to be within city boundaries, and that only roll call votes would be taken during a teleconference. Next slide, please. I apologize, this one's a little hard to see also. So we're gonna start getting into the Brown Act. So the Brown Act is, you can only really discuss items that are posted on the agenda. We have two categories. We have a posting requirements. Regular meetings the agenda needs to be available to the public at a minimum of 72 hours before the meeting. And then a special meeting is 24 hours before. But there are some exceptions to the posting requirements, such as emergency or urgencies. This wouldn't really apply to our commission, but in particularly the city council or board of supervisors, that then something needed immediate action after the posting of the agenda already occurred. Next slide, please. Meeting decorum. So the commission represents the city, its citizens, developers. We are the face, and we have to always make sure that we carry ourselves appropriately, and that we allow the public to participate at every meeting. Next slide, please. Public participation rights. So at regular meetings, the public has to be given the opportunity to speak on any matter within the commission's jurisdiction. Now, if a person comes and talks during public comment on items not on the agenda, the commission is allowed to briefly discuss, but they can't get into a full dialogue. Those matters have to be referred to staff, and then staff will go ahead and do as they see appropriate. So there a brief discussion, such as asking where a location is at, or in those terms. The public can address the commission on any item before an action is taken. And even though that sometimes it's more at the city council level, negative comments from the public cannot be limited. So the public can go on for their full 3 minutes just bashing you, and you just have to accept that, unfortunately. But that's their right to participate. Next slide, please. If commissioners fail to pay attention during an administrative hearing, the big one that was emphasized in our training was the Lacey Street Hospitality Services Incorporated versus the City of Los Angeles back in 2004. You are able to Google search this so that you can actually read the full transcript. But ultimately, there was an appeal by the Lacey Street Hospitality Services to the City Council of Los Angeles. And they brought their video cameras to record the City Council and their interaction with the City Council. The City Council members were observed during that meeting of having their own conversations amongst themselves. There were council members eating, there were council members texting. There was, I believe they said that there was 1 or 2 council members that actually was paying attention, and then halfway through the presentation, they stopped paying attention and engaged in a conversation with each other. So that last bullet point that says that the public has the right to make audio and video recordings, so they can bring in their own video equipment and record the meeting themselves and do with it as they please. Next slide, please. So there are some consequences if you violate the Brown Act. It pretty much reverses any decision that's made. If you violate the Brown Act, there could be potential criminal penalties, award of attorney fees to the parties successfully bringing the lawsuit, and then we lose the public's confidence when we violate this. Next slide, please. So the due process consideration. So planning commissioners, we act as a quasi-judicial role, and we are subject to the procedural due process. So right there in red, it says you as a commissioner are responsible for ensuring fairness in the procedure. So that just in layman's terms, the procedural due process just means that we give them a fair and impartial decision making, and that we are publicly and giving them reassurance that we are hearing everything that they are saying when they come before us. Next slide, please. So the right to a fair and impartial tribunal. Sounds a little funny. It actually made a lot of us laugh in the training to think that we are a tribunal, but that's what it is. We have the right, people have the right to come before us and be able to present in front of an unbiased officer. And those elements are us as the commissioners, and that we are doing our due diligence to really exercise our powers to listen and then make a fair and impartial decision. Next slide, please. And if you have any bias, that would automatically disqualify you from participating on any action item. So if you, outside of the meeting, expressed your opinion on a particular action item that's supposed to be coming before us, it would automatically disqualify you because you will not be able to be unbiased to the presenters. And next slide, please. So each party has the right to present their evidence, and that it's an equal playing field. So if you give one person 10 minutes, the opposing party has to have 10 minutes as well. If you allow the first party to go over by 5 minutes, that's a total of 15. You have to give the same courtesy to the other party. And in quotes, it says that he who decides must hear. So we must prevent ourselves from being distracted, not have private conversations with each other, not emailing or texting. We have to give our full attention to whoever is speaking at the podium. Next slide, please. Ex parte contacts. This one was actually pretty interesting for me. The first bullet point is, what is an ex parte contact? It's a communication with the public or the party involved, but it's also a site visit. Simply just driving by the property can be considered an ex parte contact, which I thought was very interesting because, you know, we all live in Oxnard and drive throughout Oxnard. So there's bound to be a time where we drive past a property. So I found that pretty interesting. And to disclose, it's just simply saying it on the record, and the description of the ex parte is saying that I drove by it, got out of my car, walked past it, or I spoke with A, B, and C, and we discussed this. Next slide, please. And that concludes my presentation. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Very good. Very good. Okay, Commissioner Meyer.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I enjoyed several of the sessions and presentations at the Planning Commissioner Boot Camp, and had a couple in mind, but this one was maybe the most emotionally impactful. Unfortunately, I did not get slides. The slides were not available from this presenter. It was a keynote, but I created some slides from my notes. So I would like to share those with you all. All right. We just got to go to we're on 9, and now we need to go to 1. There we go. Excellent. So this is one, as I connected with Scott, it was definitely on the soft side of Planning Commission business. What the topic was, it was improv community, as it was called. So it's the idea of taking the concept of improv comedy and putting it into how you create a community that actually functions well and is participatory and successful. So it started with a discussion of the community that was the reference point, which was Bethel, Vermont, Bethel, Vermont, small little town of about 2,000 plus people, and how they were very lacking in terms of having effective community. They struggled to support each other when there were disasters like a huge flood. And so some people got together, and the presenter was specializes in community change creation, was one of the key players in helping to support creation of effective community. So on the negative side, we talked about how do you unmake a great community. So one aspect is policy neglect. Or policies that neglect. That could look like weeds in public spaces. It could look like a downtown that's not inviting, doesn't feel safe, lacks engaging interest. Again, making a community unsafe and unwelcoming to people. Blocking change. Folks that want to look backwards at how it was, or the ways that they liked how it used to be, or the ways they thought that perhaps it used to be, without the negative parts, and wanted to keep it that way. Ignoring input. Just the fact of saying no, which is often the first impulse for people in power in a lot of cases, or with responsibility. It's easier to say no. And then not inviting volunteers. So a lot of the same people at the same meetings, lots of people in multiple positions, taking a lot of the work on, and the community members not being involved and not reaching out to people that maybe haven't been traditionally involved in community building. Next slide, please. So the basic simple concept of improv community is yes and it's the basic concept of improv, period. I've actually been involved in some trainings and received more awareness about improv being included in how do you manage organizations effectively, how do you create good corporate cultures, things like that. And so it's the idea of, instead of yes, but, yes, it would be great if we had a public-facing wharf that was inviting to all types of people, but we need to make money, so we need to make it something for just people with money. Instead of yes, but, we're looking at yes, and. Yeah, we can definitely do that, and why don't we also look at this other additional benefit that we might be able to create, or this other way of approaching the situation. And that's the core of improv, and that's the idea of engaging people and making them feel included and valued, and also reaping benefits that you might not have realized if you just said no. Next. So for the town of Bethel, they just created what they call Bethel University. It's not a land grant college. It's not a formal place of learning, higher learning. They just a group of people in the community decided to get together, who knew how to do certain things and offer certain skills and teach about certain topics. Let's create classes. And so they created classes, and people that were interested came, and then more people said, oh, well, I have this to offer now, and I can teach basket weaving, and I can teach home improvement, do it yourself. And, so classes started forming in an organic way. And then they went out and they got grant money to support further growth of these classes and of these other opportunities for people to become involved in the community. Pop-up markets were a creation. So whether it was a beer garden or different farmers markets, things like that, that people tried. And they were small scale. They were not enmeshed in getting licensure and long processes. It was more like, let's move forward, let's try something, and ask forgiveness after. Obviously, this is not the way we can do everything, and it is important that we follow our ordinances and regulations. But within the scope of what can be done, these are some considerations and ways of doing things that might be less slow to move forward, and maybe less resource intensive ways to get things started and get people excited, involved. Public art, they had some wonderful examples of art that was created by children. They had to work around regulations about what could and couldn't be painted, and try unique ways of putting art out that met those regulations still. And the whole idea was, when you have community involved, then the community feels a sense of ownership, and then you have all the resources and that engagement that we really want from our community, that brings open a whole lot of other creative opportunities. Next slide. So recommendations including imagine your community. So put forward a concept, an idea of what do we want our community to look like, without, well, that's not realistic. Well, who's going to pay for that? You start off with, as they described here, a big, hairy, audacious community kind of concept. They also looked at what are the places in the community that, quote, needed love, or a new vision for them. I'm sure you can all think of places, and you probably think of many places throughout our wonderful city that would fall into that category. Next slide. So they offered some tips, what they call a improv community toolbox. One step is invitations. Make lots of them and respond to them. So we create public spaces that are engaging, people want to be in, and invite people to join in an experience. Food and fun are always attractors of people. As we well know through, meetings that get better attended oftentimes when there's food or something engaging to do. And they had, parties green on public lawns, free hot chocolate cart, different things like that. They had an invitation for community walks. Some people worked out space for people to have one-on-ones with people, get to know somebody they don't know yet. Create building projects at tables from art supplies, things that we may have done in meetings and retreats or things like that ourselves, perhaps. Number two is just the basic concept of listening and really responding to what we hear and not what we're thinking. Because oftentimes people can listen to what somebody's saying, but already be thinking about what they're going to say back, or how that does or does not make sense given their own perspective. Third is ensembles. Get groups of people together. and without necessarily one single leader, so that we can create things together in more open and inviting ways. Next. They talk about crazy ideas. So welcome, embrace crazy ideas. A sample was, or a reference that they used was a book called Nudge, Improving Decisions About Health, Wealth, and Happiness, which is a book that I'll definitely be taking a look into more. The idea that small ideas, small changes can have big impacts. Number 5 is that, again, that yes and. So keeping that yes and improv style that validates and supports people and encourages them to continue to be more involved. Finding that common ground. Number 6 is embracing mistakes. So in as much as we want to be perfect in our execution and our plans, sometimes, as they say, how exactly is it put? Great is the enemy of good, or perfect is the enemy of good. So welcoming mistakes, ideally, of course, not on large-scale projects. This is not an invitation to do inadequate and improper planning, of course, but on small-scale opportunities for people to feel part of things, that's the idea. And then lastly, a box that you can break out of. So out-of-the-box thinking is the idea here. Next. And so the concept is reflected in the question of what would you imagine for blank? What would you imagine for this uninhabited lot or this brownfield, whatever the case may be? Involving children, we talk about what makes our community unique, what do we want to improve, concepts that are starting to take hold in some places, free food gardens, where instead of we have large lawns or other non-productive vegetation, we actually grow food without worrying about what if somebody goes and takes it. Well, they're going to take it and eat it, and that's what we want to happen. The question or the statement, I wish this was blank. So just prefacing statements that can lead to more creative thinking. And then one of the examples that they shared was a stairway as part of the Fun Theory project. Volkswagen created this stairway. If we have time, if we can click on that, it's only like maybe less than 2 minutes. Can we share that?
Oh, yeah, I've seen this. It's great.
Isn't it fun?
Yeah.
I don't know if we can hear it. There we go.
Oh, it's great.
So it's hard to hear, but they're actually making music with every step they're taking.
Look at this guy.
Yeah. Dogs are making music with you. Perfect. Thank you very much.
Wow. Well, thank you. I'm thinking of everything I can wish. All right. I really appreciated that, both of you. Excellent. All right. So we'll move to item I on our agenda, community development staff updates. So this better be entertaining. Hard act to follow here.
I don't have music with my presentation. Hi, everybody. It's Jeff Lambert. Calling in remotely like you all are. I know Scott has some other updates. I wanted to give you a couple. One, that the council this week approved what's called the Fiber Master Plan, which is a really important document to set the stage for the city to be better connected. I know Daniel Chavez, I believe, spoke on that item. So it's really good to see the city moving in that direction. We have a really good foundation to have high functioning fiber and broadband, but having council policy direction to implement that is important. One of the things that's included in that master plan is that we incorporate standard language and approval documents on developments that they put in their share. So it's something you'll probably start seeing now in documents coming forward to you. And we actually have added the city's technology staff to our development advisory committee meetings so that they're really engaged in the development review process. So that's really good news and a big step forward. Also, the council is going to consider on May 19th an update to our development impact fees. You might not be surprised to know that we have somewhat antiquated fees. One of our fees, the park development fee, was last updated in 1972. And the newest fee, I think, was last updated in 2006. So we have very out-of-date fees. So the good news is we're bringing those fees all up to current. The bad news is we're doing it during an international economic crisis. And so I suspect the council will have a good debate on the 19th about whether or not these fees should go into effect immediately or should be delayed in some way while we deal with the future economic conditions. But just so you know, that's a very big deal for us to get our fees in line with where they should have been a long time ago. And that's a big milestone to get on track. And then lastly, for me, just to give you, where we are with COVID briefly for the commission. Obviously, COVID is a health risk, but it's also an economic risk. You should know, if you haven't watched the city manager's updates to council, that it's going to have a significant impact on our budget. We're estimating just for the balance of this current fiscal year, we'll have lost about $8 million in revenue. That's out of a $140 million general fund budget. That's a big deal. And frankly, just as the city was getting our budget in really good order, we had anticipated before COVID that this was going to be a fairly smooth budget year compared to last year. And we were really hopeful that we had turned that corner. This is throwing us a curve. We are working hard to minimize the impact on the organization, but it will clearly have some and something to pay attention to as we go forward. Also on COVID, just so you know, it's clear to me that the activity of community development has not gone down through this process, even though we've been closed now for 6 or 7 weeks. We haven't stopped doing work. It's moved us, as I tell people, into the 20th century from a technology perspective. And yes, I said 20th, not 21st. But it means that we're doing remote work. Most of our staff are working a lot remotely. We're actually taking applications in electronically, reviewing them electronically. And so we've really, the team in community development has done a fantastic job adjusting to this new world and still providing terrific customer service. It's been rocky, but overall, the commitment of the team, I couldn't be more proud of how well we're doing with this transition. And the workload is still there. I'm happy to say our budget for community development is above projections for this fiscal year. So we're doing our part to keep things moving and keep people employed in the construction industry, all within social distancing protocols. And then finally, I think you probably all might have heard the governor today. He announced the specifics for the moving to stage 2 of the recovery, which means many more businesses will start opening tomorrow. It's still a very limited opening, and there's still a lot of concern from our health officials about any bad operators that open and don't behave themselves could put us back into a significant increase in virus infection. So we will be working hard with our business community to make sure as they open, they do so under strict protocols of social distancing, masks, gloves, sanitizers, and retail will open on a drop-off, pickup only. Restaurant in dining is not anywhere near opening. But so just it's a moving target. But my job in these crises tend to be working on the recovery, and so we're now moving into that recovery phase even while we're still in the middle of the crisis. So wanted to give you a brief update on that. Happy to answer questions if you have any. Otherwise, I know Scott has another significant update to provide to you about your upcoming next commission meeting.
Thank you. Commissioners, any questions?
Madam Chair, I just had a quick.
Sure.
Sorry. Who's speaking?
Chavez
I can't hear you, Daniel.
am I still muted?
No.
No, you're good.
Okay. Director Lambert, just a quick question. I've had a couple of inquiries from residents in regards to the old Citibank location on Channel Islands and Saviors. They're under the impression that the applicant had the project go through because they noticed the fencing put around. I've told them that the project hasn't returned back to us. So can you provide a little update?
Yeah, I can. So as you know, the applicant, you took your action on the project. The applicant appealed that to council. Our regulations require us to bring that to council within a very limited period of time. The applicant then asked for an extension of time, and we now have actually taken it off calendar. So the council has not yet considered the appeal. The applicant is looking for alternatives because I think they see the writing on the wall that what was proposed and acted on by commission with your denial was going to see a similar fate going forward. So they are actively looking at alternatives. They were doing that much more actively before COVID hit. I suspect we'll get back in touch with them in more detail in the next couple of months. But I think they're looking at a significant change to that project scope. And if it does come back as a different project, it would obviously go back through the process, which means back to staff for our analysis and then back to the Planning Commission for your consideration.
Thank you for that, Director Lambert. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you. Anyone else? Thank you, Mr. Lambert. Mr. Kolwitz.
Thank you, Chair Frank. I'll be very brief. At your next meeting on May 21st, we'll be reviewing a fairly significant project. It's the Sakioka Farms development agreement and tentative track map, as well as some road naming. In scope, just so you're aware of a size of the project, it's a 430-acre project, and we're looking at creating a series of lots out there to help facilitate future development as identified and envisioned by the specific plan. Several weeks ago, we shared a link to the previously adopted specific plan with all of you online. The hope was you'd start reviewing that ahead of the meeting, just become familiar with that. As of tonight, we were able to get the prior certified EIR and all the appendices that went along with that in a digital format that we're posting online as well. So that'll be, both those documents are completely available to the public, and I'll forward you a link for those documents as well if you want to go back and review a prior EIR. However, the action before you will have its own CEQA document called a consistency analysis showing this DA and the map and how it works with that prior adopted environmental impact report. That's essentially to get you primed for the next meeting. We will be releasing the staff report and the documents associated with it this coming Thursday on the 14th. That will be the only item on the agenda, and we just want to give you time to start prepping for that. We will have another digital meeting, so this meeting, expect that same format to follow for this coming May 21st. And that's everything that I have for you.
Okay, I would like to have you resend me the Sakioka document that you said you sent me a link whenever.
Yeah.
If you could please send that to me again.
Yes, commissioners, we'll be happy to send both one email to all of you with the link to the specific plan and the EIR.
Yeah, and just so we're clear, there will not be a new EIR on this that's coming before us, right?
That is correct.
Okay, so it's going to be evaluate, only because I'm trying to focus what our attention is supposed to be on. We're to look for consistency with the previously approved EIR.
That is correct, and staff,
project.
staff as part of our document will lead you down that path on how we believe that could be achieved. The specific plan the specific plan that we previously sent to you had a summary document in the very back of it.
Right.
So that gives you essentially the highlights if you want, and if you wanted to dive deeper, that's why this other document may be of interest. In either case, if you reviewed none of those documents, staff will still walk you through the project and the environmental review on May 21st.
Okay, I understand, but I'm asking for myself. I want those background documents, please.
Sure.
Okay, and this is, you know, for those of you who haven't gone through this process before, this is very intense. There's a lot of information. I'm sorry that we're getting this only a week before, because it's a lot to go through. This is where your details matter. So, yeah, the sooner the better. Okay, thank you very much. Any planning commissioner business? It's not on the agenda, but I'll bring, other than our presentations. Anything else?
Madam Chair, I'll just say Happy Mother's Day, because it is this Sunday. So Feliz Dia de las Madres. And this was actually pretty cool to do this virtual meeting. I think for our first one, we actually hit it out of the park. So,
I think so.
Great job to my commissioners. So again, Happy Mother's Day, Feliz Dia de las Madres. And yeah, thank you.
Wow, thank you. Okay, gentlemen, have a wonderful evening, and I'll see you in a couple of weeks. Okay? We stand
Wonderful.
adjourned. We stand
Okay.
adjourned.
Thank you.
Okay.
Thank
Bye.
you
Thank you.
all.
All right, bye.
Bye-bye.